Helldivers 2 is in an interesting place these days. After its surprising release and popularity, becoming one of PlayStation's fastest selling games, it's recently seen a pretty stark decline in the amount of players playing, and the general community sentiment has been fairly low. Of course, this is to be expected with every live service game. These games have peaks and they have valleys, and at the moment, we're in a bit of a valley. But there are some things that certainly would change the course for this game, and I think help it reach its true potential, and potentially even become stronger than it ever was. Dr. Pooplove here, and here's what Helldivers 2 should do to improve and bring us back to patriotic glory. Let's get right into it. So the first thing obviously is already on everybody's mind. It's already on the developers' minds too, and that is that they need to balance the game. Right now, the general community sentiment is that every time a new gun comes out that people end up enjoying, the devs end up nerfing it. And any of the guns that are added that are weak only get small buffs that don't really seem to make a big difference. All of this is to serve the devs' balanced philosophy of risk and reward and relying on your stratagems. Ultimately, I do think it's a well-meaning philosophy in that they do want everything to have a risk and reward. They don't want anything to be too strong, but their approach to balance has just been to largely neuter the guns and make them feel less stark, less interesting, and less potent. In general, the way they've currently have it tuned is reducing the fun. This is a PvE game, it's not PvP, so it doesn't need to be that serious. If something is a little bit too strong, it's honestly not going to break the game. And so the devs definitely need to start leaning more on the side of fun than on some rigid set of principles. But the devs have heard these concerns, and they are working to fix these things, so I expect this all to change in short order. But I also hope that rather than just trying to make guns stronger, they try to give each gun character and uniqueness, along with some risk and reward, just to keep things interesting. We will see how this all shakes out though, but this is definitely not everything that should change about Helldivers. This change largely will just reduce the bleeding. There's much more that needs to be done in order to bring a lot of the players back and make this a great game for years to come. And the next thing I think really needs to change are some of the quality of life aspects. Obviously, they have a long list of bugs that need to be addressed, which would overall improve the player experience, but they need to go beyond that. I particularly would like to see loadouts. I know that's something that has been said will encourage sticking to a meta, but I disagree. The reality is people are already choosing the meta, and loadout selection only adds more steps for them to do so. In fact, I end up actually panic choosing a meta often when I'm in the menu selection screen, just because my team is waiting on me. Instead, Arrowhead should give us time to theory craft a loadout and have it ready to select when we drop. Also, just the mere fact that bugs and bots are so different means I need to change almost everything I have every time I switch. It makes this selection too cumbersome and too hard, and I often end up forgetting to switch certain things. It just makes it harder to drop down with the loadout you really want. Another quality of life thing is to give us some kind of transparency on what kind of enemies we are facing, especially bugs. I often have found that I'm speccing my loadout to deal with one type of bug like the Bile Titan, only to find that they actually aren't there on the map. If anything, this is encouraging people to select the meta, as not knowing what you're going to be facing means that you have to be prepared for every type of bug. These fixes alone will help so much. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is armor, which I think needs a lot of work. Now, the light, medium, and heavy feel okay, so I don't have a ton of recommendations there, but I think the passives definitely need a lot of work. For one, we haven't really gotten a new one in a while. The newest one we have seen is from the Cutting Edge Warbond, which is the armor set that mitigates arc damage. But that is super niche, and it's only really helpful if you plan to use a Tesla tower, or if your teammate is wielding an arc thrower like a maniac, which is just annoying that you would have to wear special armor just for that. They need to add new armor passives and really make them interesting. One often requested one is the reduced fire damage, which actually would be very useful, especially for those pyromaniacs. But generally, we just need ones that will actually have some noticeable impact on the battlefield and ones that are interesting, that provide something special. Another thing which I do believe is in the plans is to add some armor passives to helmets too, which should add for some additional variety. Okay, now another thing I want to talk about is they need to rework some of the progression in this game. I'm certainly not maxed out everywhere, but I am when it comes to things like requisite slips, for instance. These slips don't even feel important anymore because you can very easily end up maxing it out. Once you buy all the stratagems, you only have to use these to get any new ones that come out, and then through playing, you just easily max out again. Samples, I think, are in a decent spot. I mean, for me, I'm still grinding through, although common samples are perhaps the hardest to get, which doesn't make as much sense. And also, super samples are currently being level gated, so players that like to play on lower levels are kind of forced to play on higher levels in order to get those. They should allow us to trade common samples for supers or something like that at some sort of a trading post. But also, I think there's a lot more room for progression in this game. One thing I would like to see is something from the original Helldivers, and that is the ability to upgrade your weapons. This might be something that is being planned, and maybe would be something that could help out with some of the balance issues, but being able to grind your weapon somehow and upgrade it to a max level would just add a lot more interesting things to grind for. It would also encourage people to use something that isn't exactly the meta, because you would have some sense of reward for using every gun in the game. Personally, I would love to be able to grind for more scopes, for different types of fire modes, for higher capacity, less recoil, or other sorts of weapon attachments that could be tied to requisite slips plus actual XP through use of the gun. This alone would add so much more replayability and make me want to pick up and try to master every single gun in the game. And this could also apply to stratagems, which would again encourage people to try different stuff out. Now, the next thing that I think will really help is I think there needs to be some thoughtful attention on the new upcoming content, especially in terms of variety. We have heard rumors of melee weapons being added to the game, which would be an easy win, allowing for players to take something like a katana out or a big bug hammer or something like that would be awesome. But I also would like to see more interesting game changers, like vehicles, which we do know have been worked on, but also stratagems with super unique and interesting perks. One thing I'm not sure if this is actually planned or maybe this was a fan idea is I saw a camera, which was a weapon which you could use to basically spread propaganda and generally give your team perks like a lower overall stratagem cooldown time. Ideas like this are interesting and unique, and I think would add for a lot more fun in the game, even if they don't always make the most sense. And then this is something that can be really big, and that is for the game to add more mission variety. A lot of the missions right now, they do feel a bit samey, and some of the new ones that have been added end up being a little bit half-baked and you can kind of cheese through them. Now, there have been some popular ones, but I think there just needs to be overall more innovation here. Like, how about a horde mode where you face off against an ever-increasing horde of enemies, and maybe where you could progressively earn more medals each level you complete? Or what about a raid, something with more complexity and coordination and, dare I say, jumping puzzles? Another aspect of this is unique missions that you can do whenever a cool new stratagem is out, sort of like how Fortnite does it for major drops. Like, for instance, when the exosuit stratagems are ready, there could be a special mission, which is maybe a little bit more linear or scripted, where you have to infiltrate a base to capture a mech and then use that mech to fight your way out. It would be awesome and allow for a bit of a richer story experience. Honestly, Helldivers has a lot of potential. I think that is something that many have recognized in this game and why a lot of people have been passionate about it. Surely, as long as Arrowhead continues to try to work towards this potential, this game will be enjoyed for years to come. And I am encouraged by some of the steps they're taking, like ex-CEO Johan Pilestead actually stepping down in order to support this game creatively. He does have a good eye on what the community is looking for, and so I think we can only really go up from here. But what do you think? What would you like to see from this game? Let me know in the comments, and I want to say a special thank you to my YouTube members for joining the Bowel Movement. But otherwise, So long, Pooper Troopers.